Today is Veterans Day, so we have a special video for you, not involving cars, something a bit more fun. What a hero I was. If you're a veteran, you probably were issued this when you went to basic training and carried something similar when you were on active duty. The Colt M16, although some were made by FN. Or if you're an old timer, probably this M14. Not the most successful firearm ever used in the U.S. military, but that's for another video. I think there are a lot of combat vets out there who would gladly trade in those cumbersome rifles for this nice Uzi submachine gun. And with that in mind, we're going to present the Uzi submachine gun in person with a select switch, semi-automatic, fully automatic, and safe. This subgun was introduced in the early 1950s. According to all the information you get, there were only like 10 million made, going to 90 different countries. The Uzi was one of the most reliable successes for military use, but one of the most unreliable failures for law enforcement use, at least in the United States and Canada. If it doesn't make sense, don't worry, we'll explain that later on in the video, so stick around. In this video, we're going to show you all the positive features the Uzi has. We're going to tell you all the negative features that the other reviewers don't want to tell you about. You get a whole view here. Alright, number one, almost all weapons today, whether it's a rifle, handgun, or shotgun, fire from a closed bolt in this position. Then you pull the trigger after it chambers around and goes bang. If you have a handgun, you know what I'm talking about. Closed bolt, ready to fire. The Uzi operates from an antique design called the open bolt. You stick a loaded magazine in, and this is the way you carry it. The open bolt is a common setup used to find on heavy machine guns. It allows the air to circulate, keeping the weapon from overheating. Which is fine for a belt feed. We got hundreds and hundreds of rounds. For some machine guns, it's kind of silly. No one uses this anymore. This is 1950s and 60s technology. And it does have several disadvantages. Number one, it allows sand and dirt to crawl inside here and get everything dirty. And number two, when you pull the trigger, the weapon likes to jump around from the impact of the bolt. Doesn't do much for accuracy, especially out beyond 50 yards. This pertains to the open bolt submachine gun only. The semi-automatic Uzis you find in the commercial sales fire from a closed bolt, but that's a whole different gun, whole different video. Of course, if you're firing fully automatic within 25-50 yards, you probably don't care about accuracy that much. If you don't like the noise of a fully automatic submachine gun, there's an alternative. Just hook on a sound suppressor. Silences it pretty good. Not as good as a closed bolt submachine gun, but quite enough if you're using subsonic ammo. Looks pretty cool. It works pretty well. Unfortunately, because of the ammo shortage, there's no subsonic 9mm out there at the moment. Not for me anyway. So we can't demonstrate it, sorry. That's 8 to 10 rounds per second, depending on the ammunition used, and there's a way to modify this to make it quicker. That's a different video. Alright, good points, bad points. Number two, the sights are adjustable. There's a 100-yard aperture and a 200-yard. And the front post is adjustable for elevation. That's the good news. The bad news, the cone shape doesn't do much for pinpoint accuracy. Of course, with the open bolt, you're not going to get that anyway. Kind of stressed beyond 100 yards. Then to adjust the sight, you'll need this special tool, which is sure to get lost when you need it. Makes things a bit more complicated than necessary. Number three, you have a grip safety, a very good idea. It keeps the weapon from going off if it's dropped. On the negative side, it's a bit on the small side. If they just extend it maybe 1/8 of an inch longer, or 1/4 inch, but they didn't. Has a tendency to pinch your fingers when you handle it wrong. You really got to get a good grip on it. If you don't, the gun won't fire. And number four, the select switch, easy to reach with your right hand or right thumb. But to move it back to the safe position, you have to use your left thumb. Two-handed operation, when it should be one. And there's always a lot of slop in these. They chose not to correct that. You do get a mount to put your sling on the folding stock, but it has a tendency to rub in your cheek when you're firing full auto. You have to work around that. And this folding stock is ingenious, works quite well, but it's very complicated and expensive to make. Later Uzis had a simple side folder, one or two pieces. This has a lot of parts and not cheap to make, added the cost of the gun. In fact, that brings up one point. If you read up on the Uzi, they tell you that they're cheap to make because there are a lot of stamped parts. No, this weapon was never cheap to make, cost about as much as a typical assault rifle. Just a lot of pins, springs, and rivets around here. If you've ever seen a schematic, you'll know what I'm talking about. And here's a part schematic for an Uzi submachine gun, and there are just way too many little pins and springs and tiny parts. They really weren't necessary in the design, but they did it anyway. It contributes to the higher cost. Fortunately, in spite of all these parts, the gun is very reliable when the proper ammunition is used. So, like I said, they made 10 million of them, so you can't argue with that. They could have made this a lot simpler, but they chose not to. This brings us to the reliability issue. The Uzi was designed to work with NATO 9mm spec ball or something similar. If you have a full metal jacket pointed bullet, they can go out of a 4-inch handgun at 1150 feet per second at least. Uzi will be perfectly fine, will never fail you. However, law enforcement agencies in the United States and Canada don't use full metal jacket bullets. Too much penetration might wipe out some bystanders. Third world countries, they don't care, but we're a little more caring over here. So they use hollow points almost exclusively. And feeding a flat-nose hollow point in an Uzi designed for a full metal jacket with a sharp point doesn't always work quite well. This can cause malfunctions in feeding, as it did when law enforcement agencies tried these, which is why they were not very popular. Also, a lot of full metal jacket ammunition used commercially is loaded rather mild, below 1100 feet per second, and that will not have enough energy to push the bolt back on the Uzi, not the full auto anyway, causing malfunctions. Or if you're using a lighter bullet, 100 grains or smaller, you will not have enough energy to operate the bolt in that either. I speak from experience on that one. This plus the open bolt design, which doesn't exactly contribute to close range accuracy. And the overall cost, a brand new Uzi costs about the same as an M16 assault rifle. And most law enforcement agencies prefer the M16 or AR-15 semi-automatic version. And that's pretty much why the Uzi failed as a law enforcement issue weapon, at least for the United States and Canada. Like I said, the third world countries, they don't care if they use full metal jacket. They don't care if they miss the target. If you're an innocent bystander, hey, that's too bad, but we don't do that here. By the way, if you live in the United States, contrary to popular belief, there are no federal laws against owning a submachine gun or any other fully automatic weapon. No, there are not. Restrictions, yes. Prohibited, no. Of course, if you live in a communist state like California or others, yes, those are banned there. I'm not going to go into that. That's an old other video. Most people want a semi-automatic version. They'll run you around $1,500 to $2,000. You can still find them. Again, if you don't live in a state where they ban those too. If you live in a state where machine guns are legal, this is what an Uzi is going to cost you if you want a full auto. That's the starting price for one U in a box. Yep. That should limit about 99.9% of the people watching this video. That's why most Uzi fanboys or girls will settle for the semi-automatic version with the long 16-inch barrel. Costs a bit less to buy and own, as you can see. By the way, in countries that use the 45 caliber handgun cartridge instead of 9mm, the Uzi was available in a 45 caliber conversion kit, seen here, with a 16-round magazine, although I'm told there are 22 mags. Never seen one. They're pretty rare. In fact, the 45 conversion kit is now extremely rare. You'll never find one anywhere, unless you pay lots and lots of money. Nice to know you had the choice between two good calibers. So all you fellow vets out there, will you trade in your M16 or your M14 for the Uzi? For the work I was doing, yeah, I probably would have taken this if I had a choice. In fact, we found a bunch of them in dumpsters in the place we were at, as well as a bunch of AK-47s, but we were not allowed to bring them home. Oh well. By the way, please don't send me an email telling me how this video could have been longer, more informative. This is just a quickie video for my fellow vets. to see what they were missing when they were carrying their M16s and M14s. And we've accomplished that, and that ends this video. Going back to testing cars.